Imagine how different your life could be in a year if you committed to getting 1% better every day. This is the show dedicated to helping you improve your mindset, language, and behavior. Inspiring stories, practical advice, and damn good conversations. Here's your host, Joe Ferraro.
My guest today is public speaker, SiriusXM, NFL expert, Ryan Leaf. Ryan, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joe. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. And I DM'd you on Twitter after a particularly self-deprecating tweet. You were kind and immediately responded with a sure, let's see what we can do. I was wondering in 1998, if I would have asked you the same question, come on the 1% Better podcast, what would your response have been?
Well, I was pretty inundated with requests back then, so I probably wouldn't have been the one making the choice. If my self-importance was a lot different then, so it probably would have been who is this guy? How does he help me? What can he do for me type of mentality.
Yeah, one thing that struck me about your late work is the transparency, and I think it's much appreciated by a lot of people. There's a book, I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at it over the years, by Simon Sinek. It's made its rounds in social media. It's Start With Why. And in it, Sinek asks people to think about something bigger than themselves, why they get out of bed in the morning. I'd love to do a form of time travel if we can. If you think of Ryan Leaf in high school, Ryan Leaf at Washington State, and Ryan Leaf today, what three whys come to mind?
Well, I don't look back at high school. I don't look back at college. I only look at today, and why did I get up today, and why am I doing what I'm doing today is to be sober, to stay sober, and to be the best dad I can be. I really do not look at what has gone on in the past or why I did anything, or it was meant to happen the way it happened. And yesterday was yesterday, and today is, for me, it's all about today. That's the why. It's today and doing the next right thing.
What was a lever that made you change that perspective? Because at one time in your life, you were someone that would go back into those days, and today you're looking forward exclusively. Was there a major turning point that said, this is the way that I think I'm going to have my most success?
I don't know. I think being of service to others, I think removing yourself from the equation, I think has had a huge hand in that. Also knowing that you can't control what you can't control, right? You can't control any of that stuff ever. It's gone. The future, you can't control any of that stuff either. All you can control is what you have in front of you today, and the fork in the road, and making the proper choices. And that's, it's a simplistic way to look at it, but we make things so difficult as human beings. We really do.
Simplistic for sure. I wonder about the tools, right? So what practices do you have in place? What tools do you use on a daily basis that help you thrive?
I exercise. I eat nutritionally correct. I meditate and pray. I do daily readings. I'm of service to others. Those are the tools that help me try to be the best possible version of myself on a day-to-day basis. And I feel like if I do those things, then I'll lay my head down at night a sober, grateful man, and wake up and be able to do and try to do the same, try to accomplish the same.
I've heard you say that living sober is not easy, and that's obviously something that a lot of people understand from a distance. But is it still a daily piece of the puzzle for you?
Not the using side of it. I call a sober life all inclusive when it's a mental capacity. Like, I used drugs to numb myself and to self-medicate what the real issues. The drugs are just are a byproduct of the real problem, and it's the mental health issue, more or less. It's the narcissism, it's the anxiety, it's the depression, all those things. So those are the things you have to work on a daily basis, because um, you're used to numbing yourself out when you feel these feelings that aren't comfortable, and to actually sit in those feelings uh, is inspiring. When I know people that do it on a daily basis, it really is, because that was all I looked for, was to numb away, not feeling like a failure or depressed, or I just didn't want to feel anything. And now I do. I feel everything, and sometimes that's hard, uh, and sometimes that's really difficult, and that can be a struggle for a lot of people. But maintaining what I've come to know as a sober life is what it's all about. And life's life. It's not easy. It's hard. It's hard for everybody. It's just how you choose to deal with it that matters.
You're a year older than me, and it struck me that you've lived an incredibly full life. Do you look at it that way?
Yeah, I'm the oldest 44-year-old you'll know. I think, just in terms of life experience. Though what's interesting is that I think I was a child developmentally until I was like 35 years old, though. So in the last 9 years, there's been a lot of development, growth, all those things that I could have really used in my late teens and early 20s. That's for sure.
Are you one of those people that says I wouldn't change anything? I'm glad everything went the way it was, despite a lot of pitfalls.
Yeah, definitely. That's you can't you can't go back and change the beginning of the story. You can start now and change the ending, and I think that's the best way to look at it. I'm not the person I am right now unless I had gone through what I've gone through. And that's a slippery slope when you start looking back on things and what would you have changed. I wish I would have treated people better, but I think I think everybody feels that way. Um, that may be the only regret that I have. Life experience is life experience, and it's prepared me to be the best possible version I can be today, especially be the best possible dad I can be, and that's important for me.
I went back and watched your acceptance speech into the Washington State Hall of Fame. You named over a dozen teammates, and I have heard you in other places talk about some of your personal failings as a teammate. And yet in that moment, you took precious seconds of your speech to mention them. I wonder what went into that process.
Well, the quarterback and the coach get all the credit and the glory when things go well. And if it weren't for those guys on that team, um, I wouldn't have been the success that I was. And I thought it was appropriate uh, to recognize them, because no way I'm there if it weren't for them. There's just no way. I wasn't talented enough on my own um, to be in a position like that, to be a Hall of Fame caliber and um, quality player.
It's interesting you say that, because by all accounts, you were world-class talented. Throw the ball 80 yards, is that correct?
I don't know. You never have to throw the ball that far. So
I've seen it close, Ryan, and you had a deceptive foot speed. You were strong, 6'5", 235, one of the records. So you did have that talent, but there seems to be a difference in your language lately about actually looking to see, even though you had the talent, you did recognize those people, even in retrospect.
well, if it were another sport, like if I had gone on to play basketball, my talent alone could have probably carried me over. I was a very talented basketball player. If it was in baseball, and I was a very talented pitcher too. I mean, I think your talent can be more independent at those levels and those sports, and you can rely more on yourself to be successful. At football, it's the epitome of a team game. I mean, if all 11 on any side of the football aren't functioning in the way they need to be functioning together, you're not going to be successful. Period. And I think that gets lost a lot in the game of football, in terms of one player making a difference. It's been really rare. I think to college football, and the one name that comes to mind is Cam Newton. That year that they went undefeated and won a national championship, he was really the motivating factor and all that. But you'd be hard pressed to find where one singular player was the reason behind a successful team at that kind of, when you're talking about football.
That makes sense. My background's in baseball. I played college baseball. In preparing for the talk, I was picturing you as a pitcher. I didn't know, but had to be a tall right-handed pitcher. What kind of pitcher were you? How far did you go?
I pitched and I played shortstop. I played all the way up until college. Unless the ball was in my hand pitching, I kind of got bored with it. Basketball was my true love. I played basketball my freshman year at Washington State as well as football. And, Coach Price came to me and just said, hey, if you focus on this football thing, I think you could make a living at it, is the way he put it. And, I sometimes regret that I gave basketball up. I loved it. It was my favorite of all the sports to play, but clearly I was better at throwing the football around than I was at putting it in the hoop.
What advantages would following basketball to potentially the pro level have afforded you? What advantages personally or mentally?
Guaranteed money. Guaranteed contracts. Probably more exposure. I think in a team sport, a larger team sport, you can get your character defects can be hidden a little bit more. But basketball players, great basketball players, they're more on display. That pedestal is a little bit higher and more alone. You're not able to rely on the teammates as much, and that may have helped those character defects be more exposed early on, not in the highlight of the NFL. Before those things came to fruition, that may have been helpful in developmental in my brain development and dealing with failure.
Your work now involves analyzing players, evaluating quarterbacks, thinking about how teams might perform. I'm wondering about what you can share about what you've learned about plucking out the intangibles of prospects. What, through your life experiences and through what you've seen and gone through, what advantages do you have that can now allow you to kind of locate those intangibles?
We have no idea.
Really?
Whoever's telling you anything, you have zero idea. Josh Rosen for me was going to be a Tom Brady type of quarterback and has never got an opportunity, right? It depends on where you go. I saw Justin Herbert as being a great success coming into the NFL, and Tua Tagovailoa is struggling, So I happened to be right last year, where a lot of people had that flipped around the other way. So you have no idea. You have no how somebody's going to respond. I feel like the players nowadays are more ready, more prepared, more mentally prepared to deal with failure. But no one was seeing the mentality shift and the change in Carson Wentz over the last year when you weren't able to perform on the football field. So people like to say they know, but everybody, and whoever's telling you a different story is lying to you. Everybody believed that Peyton and I were can't miss guys at 1 and 2. So hindsight's 2020 when you look at this stuff, but you try to evaluate somebody's physical tendencies, how they absorb and perform under pressure and things like that. But you're just, and it really depends on where you go. It really does. If you go to a systematic failure, it may be a chance you just get lost in the shuffle. You may be a great NFL quarterback, but no one will ever know it because you played for the Jets.
Yeah, I went back and watched the first game you played with the Chargers, and I didn't watch a lot of Washington State football. When I picture you at Washington State, I picture you throwing the ball downfield. There were like 3 screen passes on your first drive in San Diego. And I'm wondering, right off the bat, I'm thinking, is that something you were comfortable with? Or was that a harbinger of holy cow, we're in the complete wrong offense here?
We ran a ton of screens at Washington State too. So, that's part of an offense. You try to, if a team's going to blitz a young quarterback, the best kind of scheme is throwing quick screens and trying to get a jailbreak. And so Kevin Gilbride was a heck of a offensive mind and coach. unfortunately, he had rubbed a lot of people the wrong way in the media in San Diego, as well as ownership, and they fired him after 5 games. I didn't really have a chance to develop and learn from him. But he went on to New York and won 2 Super Bowls with Eli Manning, so he clearly knew what the hell he was doing.
So it wasn't an offensive system thing. I want to go back to something you said. We don't know anything about what we're doing. We're taking our best guess. I like that. That's fair. I never heard it put that way so bluntly. But now let's lean into your recipe. You have your cognitive biases just like I do. What is your proprietary blend? When you're watching a quarterback, what is it that you're looking for that you believe gives you the best chance to evaluate, even though it's a blind guess of sorts?
I need to meet him. First off, I need to personally spend time with them. I can't just go off of watching film and listening to interviews, but I do, close my eyes when I hear them being interviewed and some of their answers and stuff. And frankly, if it sounds like a 1998 version of me a little bit, that piques my interest a little bit in terms of red flags, and then I'll invest some more time. But I really feel like I need to meet them. And I worked with the NFL over the last 3 years or so, and I went to every combine and I work with the quarterbacks, and that gives me the opportunity to actually spend time with them and meet them, and you really can tell a lot from individuals and how they treat you when they know I can't do anything for them, really. And I'm a has-been or a never was, and how they treat people like that. That tells me a lot too. If there can be some humility around an elite athlete who's a great athlete and understands that just because you're a great athlete doesn't make you a good person, and you have to work on that.
We talk about the mindset, language, and behavior of daily improvement on the show. Is there a giveaway in language when you talk to a player?
Yeah, empathy, right? Humility. Is the conversation all about them? The conversation was always about me when I talk with people. It wasn't when I would meet people or reunite with people. It wasn't like, hey, man, what have you been up to? How have you been? What's going on? It was, would fill them in on what's going on, what all these great things that are going on for me, right? That's the narcissist personality disorder that exists. And so I think that that for me is very telling.
Do you have a go-to question or two that you would ask them?
Yeah, my biggest one is like, what do you do outside of football, outside of yourself? What do you do that's not about you? That's one of my biggest questions. And I love some of the answers. One quarterback I worked with the last couple of years spent a day of his own working with the Down syndrome kids, and kind of being a big brother, big sister in those roles. And it's all about those young men and women. Zero to do with you as a football player or anything like that, because they don't necessarily even recognize that you are a star football player or anything. They just love the fact that somebody's spending time with them and being of service, and I thought that was a very telling attribute to that young man's qualities. What's a negative answer, anonymous, that you've heard? Really the best one was like, why am I listening to you? Weren't you the biggest bust ever? That was one. So that I felt like that was pretty telling that hey, and you can learn when you walk into a room. You just always have to believe you're not the smartest guy in the room, and you can learn something from somebody. And I'll I'm not going to name the player, but he's had a rocky road of it. I'll give him that. Not to defend you, Ryan, but you weren't the biggest bust ever. I mean, you played 4 years in the NFL. I know it didn't go as people planned, but you actually lasted longer than the average NFL career. So I don't know what rubric we use in society, but I don't know how you react to that. Well, I don't. I mean, I think the word, us as peers, as players, we don't call each other that. We know how hard it is, and played 4 years. I think the expectations and who I was drafted alongside, who could be arguably the greatest quarterback to ever play, I think that adds to the identifiers that people like to use with that, and they think it's hurtful. And I think for the longest time it was very hurtful. I like took it very personally, and I saw myself as a failure until I came to the realization of how successful I was and what it meant. I've been able to redefine what that word means, and my hope is that I can help others redefine it as well, so it doesn't take them to a place where it took me, where I spiraled out of control so much that I ended up on the floor of a prison cell.
What meaningful conversations have you had with Peyton Manning over the years?
A lot. We've known each other for 22 years now, 23 years almost. So when we were just young kids. And luckily for me, I'm sure I see our relationship much closer than he does. But, he's always been around. He's always been there. He's been there in the best of times and the worst of times. And he's been honest. And I think he's been a humble person. And it's somebody I probably could have resented a lot. But it's hard to resent somebody who's, I think, such a solid human being. Him and his whole family are.
What's something he said to you that has stuck with you?
We were doing a documentary, my E60 with ESPN, and they had reached out to him to be a part of it, to be interviewed. And he reached out to me, and we had a frank conversation. He was like, this is about you and you helping people. And if I distract from that simply because they want, Peyton Manning in the documentary, I don't know if that helps, Ryan. And so what do you think? And I said, yeah, I just, I don't think that helps anything. I think it elongates the story of the football side of things, and rather not the side of recovery and helping people. And I thought that was really open-minded of him and selfless. And so that's one of the more meaningful conversations I had with him.
Wow. In my little small corner of the internet on Twitter, one of the most popular quotes is, "Comparison is the thief of joy." I wonder how you feel about that quote, and whether or not the amount of comparison that has circled your life has been fair.
Yeah, that quote doesn't really resonate with me at all. I don't feel like I'm compared to anybody really. Because you really can't compare Peyton and I. So I don't necessarily think that plays any part or something that is in my life.
Now and then?
Back then it probably was more self-absorbent, because that's who I was. So I remember I won my first 2 starts, and he had lost his first 2, and I thought, like, that was the comparison of, like, I'm so winning this.
Another comparison drew my eye. If I'm not mistaken, Tom Brady was across the sidelines in one of your last football games.
He was the backup quarterback for Michigan in our Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and I think there's the sign of maturity and evolution, right? It's like you're the star in that game. He's not even on the field. He goes on to do just things that quite literally nobody predicted. Use your football expertise for a moment, taking you out of the equation. What do you know about Tom Brady and how he made it that no one else knows?
I think he went to the right program. I think he had the work ethic, the chip on his shoulder, and then luck. Drew Bledsoe got hurt. If Drew doesn't get hurt, I don't know if Tom Brady ever sees the field. I also don't know if we know who Tom Brady is if he got drafted by Cleveland in the 6th round. So everything has been in place for him. But he's had to work harder than anybody. And that's the difference. Every offseason, his work ethic has been crazy. He's been the greatest quarterback of all time, yet he has picked something that he needs to work on to get better every year. He has not ever rested on his laurels. And at 43 years old, he went out and threw 43 touchdowns. Uh, I think it's the single most impressive thing I've ever seen from a football player in all my years of watching football.
Did he do anything better than you physically on a football field?
He got better. I didn't. I was stagnant, right? I just thought my talent was going to carry me when I got to the NFL, and I didn't put in the work. I didn't. So that's where he was better. But I mean, talent wise, you could probably say I was as talented as any quarterback who have ever been drafted. But everybody who gets drafted is talented. It's what you do from Sunday to Sunday and what you have between the years ultimately that carries you. I mean, each year there's 32 quarterbacks, and probably 10 to 12 are good to great quarterbacks in this league. So I mean, you are talking about a minuscule percentage and number that are successful.
What would that work ethic have looked like? Would it have been film study for you? Would it have been weightlifting, extra time with receivers? I think sometimes people who aren't in football have a hard time figuring out, well, he's got to work hard. Is that just running miles? How granular would it have been?
All those things you said. I watched film. I had this problem, like going to run and work out and lift weights. Like if I wasn't the best at something, if I couldn't win in it, I felt shame, and I wouldn't do it. Like, so we went to conditioning and we did conditioning tests, and I would come in last because I'm, not as in condition as everybody else. I felt shame. So I'd rather not do it at all than to end up being last, when if I would have went out and just did it and worked my tail off and maybe threw up and all of that, it would have gained respect from my veteran teammates and things like that. I didn't view it the right way. I could not deal with failure in a healthy, positive way, period, at all.
You're a parent now, and I can imagine at some point you might experience that with your son. Kids sometimes, I'm a teacher away from the microphone. I see that aversion to failure all the time. What's your advice or thoughts for parents who or coaches who are dealing with athletes or young people who show those tendencies, who really struggle with self-identity and self-worth issues when failure is in the equation?
Well, I think you got to show them examples of how people fail and get back up. And I like this one saying, and I think it can bode well for parents and coaches. You have to view failure as an opportunity to do it better the next time. That's what it is, and not a black and white issue where it's either you win or you lose. And so, and understanding there's consequences, right? No matter what, if you screw up behaviorally or anything, there's consequences. They can't be glossed over or hidden or lied about. Things have to be transparent and vulnerable, and you understand that there's consequences. But we're all these flawed human beings trying to be better every day. Everybody is, and that's the way I'm going to go about it, and making sure they are not shamed. I think for the longest time, I felt a lot of shame, and I felt shamed and judged by people early on. And then when I got to the league, it really felt damning from the media and the scrutiny. And I saw it as them saying, you are bad. Not that you did a bad thing, but you are bad.
I see now in your social media profiles a new tool in your communication toolbox, which is self-deprecation. Why have you taken that tactic?
I just don't take myself very seriously. I take my disease and my recovery and everything incredibly seriously. But if you can't laugh at yourself, you'll never be able to laugh at anything. I feel, and it doesn't cost me anything to be self-deprecating. It doesn't cost me anything, and it disengages or deignites any kind of hostility from people. In fact, they feel less than usually after the fact if they've said something, to try to get my goat. And I'm just like, hey, yeah, man, it is what it is. I'm sure a lot of people out there wish they could have been called the biggest bust ever, because that meant they made it to the NFL. I mean, that'd be pretty darn cool, I think. So, like I said, it doesn't cost me a dang thing, and it usually makes me more relatable to the people I'm trying to talk to, and the people I'm trying to be of service to, really.
You're an outstanding speaker. I mean, I've watched your talks and leading up to this conversation. I've seen you give some presentations on different shows, Dan Patrick's show, ESPN, Sirius. Did you know that talent was in you as you grew up? I mean, that's something that I gotta be honest, I didn't have that on my bingo board for Ryan Leaf.
No idea. I was so narcissistic and not self-deprecating, and probably was an incredibly terrible speaker. I never really had to. But what the message that comes from the mess you make of things makes you I think an incredible storyteller. And it's easy to be a storyteller when you're telling the story of your life, when you're an honest, transparent, vulnerable person, because it's your life. You don't have to think about all the spider webs you weaved of lies and things you've told to other people and making sure they add up when you're speaking. So I don't go in with notes. Every speech can be different depending on the audience I'm at and how I'm feeling that day, and how, what kind of trail I go down when I'm giving a speech and something comes to mind. That's why every time you listen, there's similarities, but they will always be different. They'll never be exactly the same.
Tell people where they can find your public speaking and your outreach and the projects that you're in, so we could support you.
Well, my social media platforms have been really great for interaction. My direct messages are open to the public on both Twitter and Instagram, at Ryan D. Leaf. And you wouldn't believe the amount of, since the pandemic started and where people have really started to struggle in the mental health side of things and substance abuse, probably since May, I've received around 10,000 messages from people, either thankful and grateful for support in the messaging I put out, or actual individuals asking for help. And we've been able to do that. You can go to my website, which is theryandleaf.com, which is where you can inquire about my speaking. That's been, relatively put on hold because of COVID. I don't feel really comfortable doing it virtually. I just think that my story is so palpable. It needs to be in the room so I can affect people, but that's also selfish in a way where there's people out there struggling, and it may be needed to have it done on this kind of forum. So I hope we get back to a place where I can travel and make an impact that way. But until then, I'll continue to do it through this platform and this process.
Yeah, and as someone who shares a screen with a lot of people, I can say, listeners will find the impact in this. I think with a few tweaks, you could definitely make a big impact this way, Ryan. Let's close with an audition of sorts and a story. I would love for you to close with the story from prison where you played football. I heard somewhere where you were only outside twice in 32 months. Maybe you can close today with the story about football in prison. I didn't understand that was an option, and it really kind of moved me, to be honest with you.
Well, it's just rec time is what it is. And I had gotten to the maximum security prison, the for-profit prison in Montana, and I think the second day there, and a guy came up to me and asked if I would if I was going down to rec, and I said, yeah, why not? I'll go. And when I got down there, they had a football and they had a bunch of flags, and they asked if I would play in their game and be their all-time quarterback. And I did it. I was looking at the mountains where I grew up hunting and hiking through razor wire, and I felt a ton of shame. And I heard the walkie-talkies going off from the guards. It was kind of a big deal. They were talking about Ryan Leaf's playing football down here, get down here. And it was humiliating. And I got back to our unit, and the guy that asked me to come walked up to me and said, "Today was my birthday, Ryan, and you gave me the best birthday present I could ever imagine. I got to play catch with an NFL quarterback." And I was so self-involved that I didn't hear him say it. I was still thinking it was all about me and how humiliated and what a loser I was in being in prison and playing football when I was supposed to be an NFL star. And so I chose not. I didn't go outside. I went outside April 10th the year later. So I went out on April 10th twice during my 32 months there, simply because of my self-esteem and my narcissism and all of that. Instead of, it was right in front of me. I had done something for somebody else that day, and I couldn't hear it enough to remove myself from the equation. So that's the football story from prison.
It's like a scene from a movie.
Yeah, it will be. When the movie's made, it will be the opening scene, I think.
Ryan, I wish you nothing but the best, man. The respect I have for you, being candid, being vulnerable. I see a lot of power. We talk about getting 1% better. I think that's your message right now, day after day. Flawed people, just getting a little better, man. I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. I appreciate you reaching out, and I'm happy that you do something like this during such unprecedented times. I think it's a solution-based, and that's exactly what we need to look for. You're controlling what you can control in this moment, so I appreciate the opportunity.
This is the 1% Better Podcast.